Hello and welcome to Wikipedia Weekly Network here, where Albin Larsson and I usually are editing Wikidata Live, but today it's Celtic Knot Conference 2022, so we're joined by Lucas Werkmeister and Mahir256. So hello Lucas, hello Mahir, and hello Albin.
Hello, Jan.
How are you all doing?
I'm doing fine.
Doing pretty good.
Have you been in front of the screens for 2 days straight now for the Celtic Conference? Or the Celtic Knot?
I've watched the videos, but admittedly, I haven't been as live with the events. I mean, I lost some sleep on Friday, and I discovered that, hey, it was starting, and it was like 3 a.m. Like, should I lose more sleep or no? That kind of thing.
Yes. Yeah.
But no, the videos were interesting.
And some videos are also available afterwards, and certainly this will be as always. And what we're going to try to do here today is there's new access to Lexemes through Lua on all wikis, if I understood it correctly. I haven't tried it so much myself, but here's the announcement that at least claims it. So we'll trust that. And we're going to try to do, and when I say we, I hopefully mean that Mahir and Lucas will try to make something of this. And I think Albin and I will be asking some questions mostly, in like, we're going to explore some potential of this or demonstrate some potential. And from that link that we shared here, you can also find this long link to the official docs, but go to the first one and it will be linked over there instead.
Indeed, it's the same announcement that showed up on the screen earlier.
Yeah. And this is live, so if you have any questions, ask them in the chat, and we'll try to answer them. And here, meanwhile, and no, you're not seeing double. We are 4 here today, so you might be drunk anyway, but it's not because of that you see 4. All right, where do we want to start? Do you have any general comments about this to start with?
I mean, Lucas, do you have any first? I can talk all day, but like, what, Lucas, do you able to get a word in?
Not really, I guess. Yeah, it should be possible on any Wikimedia wiki now, except I guess that on test Wikipedia and a few others, you would get the Lexemes from test Wikidata instead of real Wikidata. Yeah, and it's been available for a bit longer on Bengali Wiktionary and Basque Wiktionary, I think, for experimenting. And apparently it worked reasonably well there, and then we enabled it everywhere else.
Yeah.
And now we're excited to see what happens.
Yeah.
And did those pilots make any major changes to this, or just confirming like, yes, this is working as intended?
It was mostly, at least I can speak for Bengali Wiktionary, it was mostly just a confirmation that things do work as expected. It wasn't like I went around and changed a bunch of pages. In fact, I ended up making some pages that didn't actually exist prior to my creating them and trying to build them from lexicographical data. There's a number of good examples that I could definitely show you of what has been able to been accomplished in a number of ways. If you don't mind me,
no, please share.
That's a great idea.
Yeah, let me put my window show. My window should be showing. So this is the Bengali Wiktionary. So don't mind not being able to read any of it. I will briefly. So this is the module where I'm doing all this experimentation. It's not the cleanest code, I'll admit, but that's a topic for later. What can come out of this, however, is things like, here's a Bengali verb for to love, essentially. There's 3 meanings that are given here of the noun, 1 of the verb, and then this entire table of conjugations is being powered by Wikidata. None of this is stored in the page itself. If we go to the page, all we see is this module invocation, where it begins with invoke, This is the name of that module that I was using before. And then this here is actually the lexeme that is being pulled from. If we go to this lexeme, we will see our, hold on. If we go to this lexeme, we should see that this is the same definition, or it should look similar to the one that shows up here, at least. And then each of these 90 or 100 so forms comes from these individual forms that are present on the lexeme here. So this first person simple present form is going to show up here, and any changes that get made to this form will show up in the page as well. So that's the sort of the beauty of the lexicographical data access, is that if there do need to be updates to be made, they can be made on Wikidata, and they can get reflected anywhere that the lexeme itself is used. And in fact, what I will be showing you today is basically being able to make a table like this. But before that, just some more show and tell. So that was a verb. This is an adjective, I believe. We see that there are two meanings, and in fact, if we go to the lexeme that's displayed here, which I think is this one, we'll see that there are, in addition to the meanings here, there's also examples of these being used in action. So these are the two adjectives in question that are found in, I think these are the stories of Sukumar Rai, the famous Bengali author. They're all cited to pages that exist on Wiktionary. And in fact, they show up as links. So this is the link to the author page, Sukumar Rai. This is the actual work in which this is found. This is where it's found, this adjective. And then, it's part of a larger work, and that larger work is also being linked to. So this is certainly useful for a lot of languages where there are a lot of examples. I know Swedish has a lot of examples of different lexemes that have usage examples. So at least we can point out, okay, where is a adjective or noun being used, and how is it being used, and where is it being used? That kind of information conceivably could be retrieved in one of these lexemes.
I really like that example because it's three Wikimedia projects collaborating.
Yes.
I was just thinking the same.
Yeah, and this one has both a table for nouns and the usage examples here. This is the model lexeme, which has the general meaning of heart, that I like to point to a lot, because a lot of improvements that I've made in terms of what kinds of things can go into lexemes are reflected in this particular one. So things like, not just inanimate quality. If we wanted to add etymologies, from the Sanskrit word with roughly the same meaning, and then there's we can make references to dictionaries that refer to it, and maybe we can even link to the Wikidata item, or even a page, because at least there is a link outward to the item for soul, and presumably we could also link out to Wikipedia from there. Similarly, if there's an image that is attached to a particular sense, and there are translations even to other languages, those two could also be transformed into external links, because the information is on Wikidata already. I mean, because it is there, it can be retrieved so long as we know the lexeme ID here. And for some people who are acquainted with Wiktionary, this might be a bit of a turnoff, because you have to know what the ID is in order to be able to use it. Like right now, we can't just put in the actual Bengali word and expect anything to show up, because that functionality really doesn't quite exist yet. I mean, we have the query service, obviously, with where we can sort of go, let's look for all lexemes with this lemma. It's possible to do that, but that's not really possible in Lua. We're still essentially stuck with the lexeme ID as a sort of starting point. But even with this starting point, there's a lot that can be accomplished, and I'll hope to show you more very soon. So yeah, a lot of cool stuff. Actually, this is a verb with 17 different meanings, each of which is found in at least 3 dictionaries, but they all have the same conjugation, which is nice. Now to find examples of each of these in the literature. Anyway. A lot of ways that these could be used, and then I think this is an adjective with 6 meanings, and this is a noun with 9 meanings. But a lot of improvements that should be made. But let's start with just some of the things that I showed you before, namely, can we show meanings, and can we make a nice little box? And for this, we're gonna gonna humor Jan and Alvin a bit and do this on the Swedish Wiktionary. So this is just a sandbox page I made. This is the Bengali word for Swedish. This is the Bengali word for noun. I don't know why I changed these to Bengali. Maybe I'm just more comfortable with that. And then we have this this script error, this Lua error that shows up if you have a problem with your script. So I'm just gonna basically try to do everything with this lexeme that exists. And what is this lexeme? This is the one with the approximate meaning of average annual temperature, I think. Yeah.
Yes.
Indeed.
Yes, I picked it just because there was a list of lexemes where every form of the lexeme has some audio. So, like, if we wanted to, if we wanted to play, if we wanted to hear how it was pronounced for any of these forms, we could, display it or show it. And among this list, this was just one of the longest ones I could find that also had an example, so that we can at least see how examples can be displayed properly. Now, again, this is causing an error because we have this page, which is just a module. This is the module where all the Lua happens. This is essentially the place where all the lexeme information is gathered, and that information is rearranged and extracted and what have you. And it's eventually what's going to happen is that some of it's going to be displayed on, as you may have seen in this list of senses and examples, but some of it's also going to be passed to templates. Like if you've been on any other Wiktionary, you may be familiar with the templates that exist. So things like the Swedish noun declension. This is just a template with a bunch of placeholders, which depending on your Wiktionary, there might be a lot of logic that's been extracted away, moved away, such that you don't actually see this, or at least it's able to. A lot of magic can and cannot happen depending on what your Wiktionary has been able to do with these templates. So I'm basically taking the Swedish version of this template. I've simplified it a bit, and I guess Bengalified it. Sorry about that. But it just goes to show that this is very much applicable to all the wikis. And if you are familiar with template syntax, you can always make this stuff translatable. I'm sometimes amazed to see when I go to the German Wiktionary how often the headings are translated into Bengali. So whatever mechanism is behind that, once you have a template where things can be used as placeholders, anything's possible. I'd say anything is possible. So let's get started. This template exists and this page exists. So let's see what we can do in the intro. We have these two functions. This is just like some boilerplate setup, nothing too special. The first thing we need to do is we need to find out, what's the lexeme ID that we want to use. And for this, we're going to assume that whenever we use this invocation of Wikidata test, and we call this function called all, this is the function all, it's going to be called here. We're going to assume that its first argument is a lexeme ID. And for this, I believe it's enough to do something like this, where we have the list of arguments and we just take the first one. Now that we have this obtained, we can also actually obtain the lexeme itself, which is accomplished by means of a call to this function. And once we do this, we will see that we have a lexeme object that we can manipulate and do fun stuff with. Once we have this, we can now do a number of interesting things. Let's say we want to get, if we go back to the, I can't, hold on. If we go back to the lexeme that I listed here, so this thing at the top here is the thing that usually appears, when you look for a word in a dictionary, this is the version that appears at the top. It's called the lemma. And, as a simple thing, as a very simple start, we might want to just display the lemma. So for this, we can do something like, we can use this current lexeme, and then we can use this function get lemma, and as a parameter, we have to sort of say what lexeme's lemma, or which language code's lemma do we want to use. It's not really important for Swedish or Bengali or German, but it is important for some other languages. For example, in Hindustani, there are lexemes that have both a Devanagari lemma and a Perso-Arabic lemma. And so being able to select the right one is important, depending on who you're presenting this to. For Swedish, it doesn't really matter, so we can just hard code SV as the lemma that we want to display. And then what we should be able to do is return the current lemma. And what should happen, assuming that I have done nothing wrong, is when I go back and read this, we see that we have the lemma. We have the lemma of this lexeme that I specified here. And if we wanted to change this to some other lexeme, let's do the temperature part of this noun. I can go back and change this, and now we get temperature out. As simple as that.
And this get lemma part is what would be something new, right?
That's one of the new functions, yes.
Yeah.
Basically, everything after this line here is going to be, or most of it is going to be new. There's a few pieces of functionality that aren't quite new, but I'll get to those. I'll point those out once we get to those.
You also would have gotten an error if you just tried to call getEntity with the lexeme ID.
Oh.
I'm sorry? What happened?
Yeah, so the getEntity was previously only for items, but it's now generic for...
Yes.
Item
yes,
and properties, yeah. So it's not like you would have gotten a base version of the data without useful methods. You wouldn't have gotten anything.
Okay.
Yeah, basically. But of course, I think the nice methods came alongside the data itself. So because I think if you did this with items, this method would not exist. So that's that. Okay, so we have the lemma here, and for now, I'm just going to. It's not what I wanted to do. I wanted to do this. So basically what I'm going to do is I'm going to keep this average annual temperature lexeme showing up. And what I will instead do is I'll keep the lemma here, but I would also like to, what do I want to do? I want to, let's make this a heading, a top level heading, which is probably going to look weird because it's after these subheadings, but it can be. I'll let it sit here. That's fine. I might even say that this is actually a heading rather than just the lemma, and then let's keep the lemma just in case we need to use it. And then this is actually the current lemma. All right. Now for something a bit more interesting, let's see if we can use this table that I made. Now this table has 8 slots corresponding to the 8 forms that a Swedish verb typically has, if it has a singular and a plural. And I've named these arguments a bit weird, and the reason for that I'll explain in a moment, but essentially each of these QIDs, these are just Wikidata QIDs, corresponds to a feature, a grammatical feature, that exists on a lexeme form. So if we look at this first lexeme form on average annual temperature, we see that there's a feature nominative case, which has the QID 131105. There's the feature singular, which has its own QID, and there's the feature indefinite, which also has its own QID. Now, the mechanism that I sort of used to match this particular set of features to a particular entry in a template is to just it sounds kind of stupid when you hear it, but essentially I just take the QIDs and then I sort them in alphabetical order, and then I throw underscores between them, so that at least what comes out is a hopefully unique string that refers to the combination of features that exists on a particular form. And I'll just pardon me whilst okay, let's see. So let's make some declension tables. I created this function here, but that's only in the interest in the case where you want to only generate the declension table and nothing else. But in general, we might want to table, and so let's make a declension table. Actually, this could be pretty general. We just need the current lexeme. We don't need the QID. We don't need the LID, because I assume we have the lexeme to begin with. We're going to need a mapping from the individual forms to the names of these arguments here. Once we have this, we can say, well, actually, first what I'll do is I will this new function that exists called getForms, which we can apply to the lexeme. And what it will do is it will return like a list of the forms on that lexeme in some order. I presume if it's if in this implementation it's just the forms in the order that it's presented here, and it's not otherwise like random. But this what I'm writing here is going to be just general in the case that the wiki-based lexeme authors decide to rewrite everything to be random. This is meant to sort of help control for that. So for each of these forms, we're just going through each of these forms. What we're going to do is we're going to get all the representations, which is done with form. So this is an actual lexeme form, which we can get from iterating. And then we have this function get representations, which is similar to get lemma, except that instead of it being the thing at the top here, it's the forms that exist, for each of these forms. So again, it's not terribly important for Swedish, but for something like Hindustani, there's going to be separate representations on this form, and we need to sort of select for them in the same way that we selected for lemmas. That's what's going on here. We have the representations. We also have the grammatical features, which basically this returns not a list of grammatical features, but if you want the list of grammatical features, I think you have to actually index into this like this. You have to add this extra 1 afterward. It does not occur to me right now why I had to do that, but like essentially that this returns a list of features. And with this list of features, what I've just been doing is where is it? I've already forgotten what it is I did before, so let me figure out what that was. Here we go. So what I did here was I essentially sorted this list of features. Actually, oh no. So I was looking at the noun template for Bengali, which only has 1 feature for each of these forms. But of course, in Swedish, each of the forms has 3 features. So the reason I did 1 is because there's only 1 feature in Bengali. If there were multiple features, then this 1 wouldn't be useful. What I need to do is I need to sort this list of features. And once I have sorted this list of features, give me a sec whilst I organize myself. Once I have this list of features, I can now do something like to the effect of, let's see. So before I do that, I need to actually generate the string that I'm using. So cat equals table cat eats. Basically, this is just turning it into this string with underscores in it. Once I have that string, I'm going to map this to the actual representation that exists for that form. To give you an idea of what I mean, basically for this first form, I'm going to concatenate the IDs for nominative, singular, indefinite, and I'm going to map this string to that concatenation. And similarly for this form, I'm going to concatenate these and then map this concatenated string to this form, and so on for the other 6 forms in this list. So at the end, what we should have is a list of forms. Well, of course, we have the list of forms, but we're not done. We still need to actually turn this into a template. And for this, we were going to need to use a different function, which already existed before. Basically, what we do is we have the template that I have on this other tab, and we need to essentially expand it with basically we need to fill in all of these arguments with the forms that we identified. So it's going to look something like this, where we say that we want to expand this template, this name. I should probably change this because it doesn't just refer to neuter nouns ending with R, I guess. So anyway, we're expanding this template, and then we're going to say the forms that we want to use are these forms that were obtained through this mapping. So hopefully we'll see what comes out from doing this. Oh yes, and this is a general function. So what I need to do here is I need to copy a number of things just to make this somewhat meaningful. Down declension table seam, and then we'll keep the heading. Why not? And then local declension table is. We need to run this function on the lexeme that we obtained. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to concatenate this. Let's add some new lines just to make it nice in terms of source. And then we're going to add the declension table at the end. So what should happen now is, assuming that I didn't. Sorry, what's up?
I think you also need to pass the frame into the make noun declension table so that you can call expand template on it, right?
Ah, yes. I forgot about that. Yes.
Or is this in default frame?
No, you're right. You're right.
Okay.
Right. I find that really confusing sometimes to say that you can't just expand a template without reference to a page that it's on. But I guess it makes sense. Yes. Thank you for catching that. This is the part where it's not about my knowledge of the library; it's about my knowledge of Lua. Thank you, and I'm grateful for Lucas to help me correct that. So now, hopefully, when I refresh this page, I think I might have copied some things. So representations, yes. Naming is important, people, and don't be like me. Anyway, now when I do this, we should see that we have this nice template. Where I think I'm missing an argument here. It should be able to say, declension or the forms of the noun average annual temperature. But otherwise, this template is perfect, I think. This should remind you at least of the existing Swedish noun templates. I mean, if we go to temperatur, then we see that the n, erna, and ers, ernas. Yeah, it looks like this is the same order. What I might do actually is yeah, I'm already regretting changing this to Bengali for the purposes of this stream, but we can change everything back to indefinite, definite, genitive, genitive, and then singular, plural, and then change this to declension of this. We go back, and now everything's in English. Still got to add the lemma, but let's quickly add that. Basically, there should be a noun. This noun should be here, so it basically says declension of this noun. So let me briefly do that. By the time we get to this point, actually, it might just be easier to copy this. To just see forms, lemma. Maybe easier to just do that, and then actually just sorry. This is where this is my interest in efficiency is kicking in. So let's lemma and let's make sure that this works right. Now, when I refresh this, yes, we see that this is the declension of this noun, and it has this set of forms. That makes sense. I hope I didn't miss anything in the comments. I haven't been able to see anything. So, anything come up? What's the next thing we want to do? We have this declension template.
There's a general question from Jan Harald. What would you say is the cleanest way to create Wikidata Lexemes modules for Wiktionaries? One master module calling submodules for various use cases, or just several different modules?
Honestly, as someone who's done basically the first thing, namely one master module calling a bunch of different things, I guess it depends on your use case and your interest in the community's interest in how much they want to absorb Wikidata. If they want to take it slow, maybe having multiple modules is the best way to do things. If they want to go, if they want to dive deep, that's up to them too. They might find the master module very helpful. I personally would like to extract as much possible from Wikidata, so I've been doing everything in one module. I guess it depends on your use case. You can think of it sort of like the Wikidata info box, which exists in a number of in Commons and a number of Wikipedias. A lot of it, I think, is built in one giant page of lots of incomprehensible Lua. But if that's not your thing, then you might want to break it up so that certain parts of it show up as opposed to other parts.
Yeah,
same philosophy.
I'm one of those people who believe that we should break it up as often as possible, is to make it more flexible as way. Like one change in the master module shouldn't affect other things.
Exactly. Yes, that's important. Yeah, I do agree that is a useful thing to do.
I would probably do it the other way around. I think I would have one basic module with some generally useful functions like get me the forms with this list of grammatical features, and then have a lot of smaller modules all based on that module, and the smaller modules can still do different stuff if that's more useful. But I don't know.
When I heard submodules in your Hall's question, I was thinking more like having a thing for a noun versus having a thing for a verb. The general utility functions that Lucas mentions, absolutely, there should be one for that. But as far as putting everything in one module for these outward-facing features like the declension template and the senses, that I think my answer still sort of holds. I don't know. It depends on like how you look at it, I guess. Anywho, so that's a declension template, and I think a number of languages are going to be able to take advantage of this immediately. What might take a bit longer, depending on the information in the senses, is the senses themselves. Let's see if we can do some stuff with the senses. And for this, we're going to quickly make a sense list name. I'm just going to do that, and then I'm going to basically do what I did before, almost. Except here I will current frame, current lexeme. I just realized I didn't pass the lemma in here, so let's quickly add that. So now we want to make a list of senses. And by list of senses, I mean essentially something like this, where we have the definition, and then underneath are a bunch of examples. And in fact, this might even be cleaner than the version that's implemented in Bengali, because it's not the best. It's going to be different too, actually, because of the way in which these resources are referenced. The references are going to be different, and there's also the language style, form, and sense, things like that. So for this, I'm actually going to keep the actual code that does this off to the side so I can look at it. Pardon me whilst I get that prepared, because I need to remember how the heck I did these things. Where is I also have a general function that gets meanings. Here we go. So what I'm going to do now, wrong window. What I'm going to do now. Also, I just realized that whenever I switch tabs, it goes black. I'm sorry about that. Try not to do that as much. Anyway, so let's make this function make sense list. Lexeme. It might turn out we don't need the frame, but whatever. Let's see what happens. So first of all, I'm going to make a nice want to format this nicely in HTML. So let's create an ordered list, which is done with this. And this ordered list is what I'm going to return eventually. There's something this the other way. So what we're going to do is we're going to actually do something similar that looks similar to what we did with the forms. Namely, we're going to essentially take the current lexeme and we're going to use this function called getSenses, which will allow us to go through each sense in order, depending on how it's returned, and then do something with them. So what I'm going to do here is there's going to be some text here for sure. And then what I want to do is for each sense, I want to get the definitions, the textual definitions that are given in the sense. So right now there's this one sense with the description in Swedish, and then for Bengali I just translated the actual term. And this list of definitions ultimately is what will show up, or what will be available to you, I should say. And just because of the way in which these are presented, I believe you have to actually run through all of the glosses, sort of like this. If that's not the case, please let me know. I think when I did this initially, I had to essentially go through the gloss and then pick the one that was in the language that I wanted. So in this case, I check if it's in Swedish, and I basically, if I want this definition, if I have it, then I just add it to, or I set that to be the text of the gloss here. So just on its own, I'm going to leave, or actually no, what I need to do actually before that is I need to add this to the list. So if you're familiar with HTML, that's an item entering an ordered list. And then I need to add as the text for this entry the actual definition. Now that we have this function, we need to basically add this. I think on the Swedish dictionary, this comes after the declension table. So let's add meanings, sense, list, seam, current meanings. So what should happen now, assuming that this is written properly, is that when I refresh this, current meanings. Yes. Current meanings. Did I not find this? What's the deal? Why? Oh, it's a table. Why is it a table? It's very interesting.
I think there must be some method that you call on meanings to get the HTML or whatever out of it in 950.
Oh yes, that's certainly possible. Yes. I have to remember what that meaning is. What that is. Oh yes, to string. Yes, I need to stringify this. Yes, that's what it is. Yeah, you gotta be careful about what gets turned into a table and what isn't. So here we go. We have this lexeme with this out of place heading, and then we also have the first meaning. So to make this more interesting, we might actually change this to a different lexeme. What's a lexeme in Swedish that has more than one meaning? Jan or Albin, do you know any offhand?
You could go with Klot, our
yes,
dear friend.
What's the? Should know this offhand, but okay, here we go. 408329, I think is what it is. So let's save this. Now what should come out is, here we go. So we have Klot, and then we have the declension table, and then we have the four meanings of Klot showing up. Yes. I don't actually know if this has. Okay, so it has a usage example. Nice. So this will be. So this next part will actually be somewhat useful or more interesting, because what I will do, and actually let me put this up so that people can see it. People at home can see it. What I might do actually is, so this usage example points to the third sense of Klot, namely a planet, which is usually the Earth. And we can sort of display it underneath the particular sense that is being referred to. Sort of how these examples here, depending on the sense that qualifies them, they're listed under the particular sense. So these are all have the sort of heart and soul meaning, and this one has the, actual human organ meaning that's being portrayed. So let's display that then. For this, we're going to need a way to format examples. And what I will do actually is let's get this ready by saying samples theme. And then we want the ID of the sense, because that will allow us to go back here. And when we look at this example, we see it's pointing to the particular sense in question, namely S3, this being S3. And basically, we need this ID to know which sense to put this under. And this will make a bit of sense in a moment. So get examples, current seam, sense ID. And so what I will do now is create a, so the way I've formatted this in Bengali is to just create a definition list. Examples. Yes, that's right, you have to stringify everything. Stringify the examples. So now what I'm going to do is actually, this is going to be stuff that you can already do with Wikidata items, where you have the lexeme in question, but we want to get all of the statements, statements that have this property usage example. And in fact, we could even say, or I'll keep this here and I'll just add a comment to the point that this is, to the effect that this is the usage example property. And what I will do is first of all, I'll just take the text of the usage example, which is obtained through this really long path. And what I will, and basically just as a starting point, what I will do is, and then the text, and then basically I want to italicize this text, and then yes, that's what this should look like. Just make that I did this right. Yes, and done. Yeah. I think that should be about right. So then at the end, we have the examples for that sense. And when we call get examples, the examples that are returned should be added to the list of examples. And I'm really hoping I didn't mess up any names. Okay, I think that's fine. Okay. Now what should happen, I think, is, there we go. So this is, so right now this shows two examples? Or did you just add a second example?
Yes, I just added a second one.
Okay, cool. Awesome. So right now we are showing examples on all of the senses, which is not what we want. What we really want to do is we want to filter for those examples which pertain to the sense in question. We have the sense ID here anyways, so this amounts to just adding a condition here saying that if in the list of qualifiers of the usage example statement, qualifiers, so and this is the subject sense property. You look at the first statement, value.id, and if that's the same as the sense ID, then we add the example text. Otherwise, we just skip the example. What this should do now, assuming that this is the same line that I wrote before, what this should do now is that for these examples, they will only appear underneath the meaning that they actually try to illustrate, essentially. So this sentence here only refers to planet, usually the Earth, and this sentence only refers to the solid ball. What might be useful, essentially, if an example gets really long, is to here we go. Where is it? Is to essentially. So what I'm actually going to just in the interest of time, because I think we're running out of time, what I will do is copy a number of lines that I did in the Bengali example. So for this same statement, we can also get the subject form to which it applies, because this information is also available. And for this form, we can get the form the same way that we can get a lexeme or an item or a property or a sense with the same get entity function that I used at the very, very beginning. You can take a lexeme ID, a QID, or a form or sense ID. With this form, we can get the representation of that form in Swedish, not Bengali. And then what I'm doing here is I'm taking this text. For this, I'm going to need to this here. I'm taking this text, and then anywhere that this form essentially occurs, and this line could be adjusted, obviously, depending on whether this word forms a part of other words. Basically, anywhere that this form exists, I'm just bolding. So when I do this now, sample form string, I'm just adding the MediaWiki bold tags. So when I do this now, and I refresh, we see that the word clot is now bolded in each of the examples. And in fact, the form, if this were using one of the inflected forms of clot, then that inflected form would also be bolded here. All right. So we've added the examples, and we've bolded the actual word as it appears in the example. I guess last but not least would be, actually being able to cite where these forms are coming from. And for this, I think it would be, it would be important to know how it is that these are represented. So in this case, how this is represented is as just a stated in with a retrieval date, and this has a label like so. I don't know if the title is important here. I guess we can also retrieve the title if need be. But basically what I'm going to do now is I'm going to say, I guess for my graph in pairs references, do, then done. Basically, I'm going to iterate through the references, because obviously not all examples are going to have references. But for those
it
that
has
do,
now.
Oh, it does? Oh, awesome. Okay, I think my point still stands, but yes, for those that do have references, this will iterate through them. If it doesn't have a reference, oh well. For these references, what I'm going to do is I'm going to say, actually I should move this down here, because this is where I'm assembling everything for the most part. And what I need to do is I need to basically, sorry, I'm copying a bunch of stuff from the Bengali example, make things fast. So I'm going to take the item for the source that's being used, and then I'm going to get the label. This is a convenience function that already existed. There's a label in a particular language of a particular source, and that can be used. And then what will happen ultimately, I believe, is there's a couple things I need to add. So what I'm going to do now is I have this text here, which is basically which is basically just the label of the source that this comes from. So this is going to be the protocol from 1998-99, and this is going to be the open data of the Riksdag. And I'm just adding this as some text that appears on the inside of or as a separate element that appears right after the example in question. So actually what I can do to make that even more explicit is to, basically what I did here was just to offset the examples for those on screen readers, I guess. I don't know. That's the accessibility term, right? Those on or those in terminals, I guess. Let's add a M dash for the source, almost like a letter. These are lines from a poem, and it's written by the author. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to add this like so. This is actually text what I will do here is just in case that there is no example text, then is to do something like this, so that it'll show up empty, but whatever. It should be too visually displeasing to look at. Oh, selected identifier done. Why is that? Am I missing something here? I hope not. Maybe it's this M dash. I don't know. Whatever. I'll forget the N dash. End. Yes. End. Sorry. I use Python more than Lua, so I end up using, or I forget what languages to keywords to use. But now what we have here is for each of these sources, we know where this is coming from. So this is coming from protocol, and this is coming from the open database. And really, the rest of the bells and whistles that come here, namely the Wikisource icon and the links to Wikisource, that's not really Lexeme, wiki-based Lexeme related, I guess, in some sense. Like that's stuff that you could sort of format on your own if you if you were formatting references before from items, then the same logic you could sort of borrow and use here to format these. Anything else I might do with the references is just going to be messing with Wikidata items, anyways, or Wikidata statements and stuff like that. It's functionality that already existed and is not specific to Lexemes. If that makes sense. So it's 50 after the hour, 52 after the hour, and we see now that we have a noun, we have the declension from that noun, and we have 4 senses, 2 of which have examples with sources on. Oh, you changed the source, nice. And when we look at the source, we see that all that is just one line. Just one line and a Lexeme ID, this ID being the Lexeme that's being used here. And in fact, there's so much other things we could do. We could add the grammatical gender. That's also a statement thing. We could add the paradigm class. We could add the SAOB ID. All things that, I mean, if you've done this with items, you can do this with Lexemes as well. Yeah. So unless there's something else you want me to try to hack up in 8 minutes, I think in terms of the Lexeme specific functionality, I think we're basically done.
Do you want to try your example with where you started with annual average temperature?
Oh yeah, sure. Actually, absolutely. Yeah, I can go back to annual average temperature and do this here. Oh, fantastic! Thank you. And yes, as you can see, the actual form, the inflected form, is being bolded. That's amazing. Thank you for doing that. Yes. Yeah, and actually things like combines Lexeme, we could add these as etymologies. One thing I want to do soon is to add etymologies and pronunciation audio to this Lexeme here, because you can say it's from the Sanskrit word, for example. And if for example, if we wanted to go further up, maybe or has a etymology or does not have an etymology. Maybe this has an etymology. Yes, it has one, and then these are probably derived from other words. So if you wanted to add that, you'd go as far as you wanted. I imagine like at one point we'd be able to reproduce an entire line like this, or not a line like this, but let's say a line like this, for example. We might need a cognate property for this part, but this entire part, I imagine one day it could be reproduced just by going up the derived from Lexeme property to do interesting things. But that's mostly just a matter of processing statements. I think the basic wiki-based Lexeme specific functions have mostly been hit. So, if you wanted, yeah.
These are such great examples, and I can already think of. So one thing we have on the Swedish dictionary is that we only display the audio for the main form. But using this technique, it would be really add it to your existing loop and have the audio for all the various forms. So exactly. Already there, it's not that far away from getting real value out of this.
No, absolutely. I would like to see that happen as well. I don't know what the good interface would be, like from a UI perspective. How would these show up?
Yeah.
what would be the best way to make them show up? Lucas, do you have thoughts on the least intrusive way to show 8 different audio files on a page?
No, not sure. It always annoys me when on Wikipedia articles there's just this image of a loudspeaker, and when you click on it, it actually opens in a new tab. But I guess, which I find annoying, but if you want to have it on the same page, then you would have to fit at least some amount of controls somewhere. And you probably wouldn't want to make it take up more space when it's playing, because then that reflows the whole text, and that's also awful. So
Yeah,
not sure actually.
Indeed.
Yeah. There's a tool that exists called Hangor, which essentially is a clone of another tool that is no longer maintained. What I essentially did for this is to, obviously this is on ToolForge, so more things go than on Wiki, but here all I basically did was, assuming that it loads, it might take a while to load. Well, what you will see on the left side is the list of forms, and then next to the form is just a little volume icon where if you click on it, nothing shows up, but it'll just play the thing for you. If I click on this, it'll just play the form. At least we can see that it's there. Yeah. That would be interesting to be able to reproduce on Wiki. I think that would be like the least intrusive thing in my view. If that's not possible, then
I think that's also works for forms because they're short, so you don't end up with an entire speech from someone, and I don't know where to stop this. You have to kill the tab.
Right.
But for anything like, because even this long word, it's going to be less than a second long, each of the audio files.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the number of languages can already benefit from getting the logic for this happening. So like German and French and Dutch, I think, can already do this. Just change all their templates to use Lexeme forms. So yeah, lots of possibilities, I'd say. I mean, yeah, a lot of this is just statement manipulation at this point, and nothing specific to Lexemes, but otherwise it's quite an art, and I think there definitely needs to be more people that are able to exploit this. If they are familiar with Lua for Wikidata items in general, then I think adapting this to Lexemes shouldn't take too long. Getting acquainted with the Lexeme API shouldn't take too long.
So one difference we have seen between working with items and Lexemes here, and you touched at this before, is that we can't get the Lexeme from the page itself currently. We need to add that each time. Maybe for Lucas as well. I was wondering what the plans are for that. Will we get something like site links to have that type of opportunity?
I'm not sure. I don't think so, because there can actually be several Lexemes with the same exact lemma as the current page title. So I guess it would be in theory possible to have a Lua function that returns all the Lexemes with that same lemma string, and then the Lua module would have to somehow decide which ones of those to show, depending on statements or whatever. That's probably possible. We might have to put some limit on it so it doesn't return 100 Lexemes.
Yeah.
But that's actually one of the things that came up during the trial phase of the feature, not for the lemmas, but for the statements, to be able to find a Lexeme based on the statements that it has. And that's been a feature request for items as well since forever, to find an item based on the statements that it has. And I think it was pretty clear that this wasn't going to happen before we roll out this feature to all the Wiktionaries. But perhaps it will still happen. Or perhaps the search by lemma will happen sooner, I think. Well, you'd have to add some kind of data structure for that to be able to search it efficiently.
Nice. Honestly, like this, this tab is basically a separate interface to the query service that exists. It's called the linked data fragments interface. So if you have like a Wikidata query service statement, triple, if you're specifying that, and you know two parts of it, or even if you know one part of it, actually, I think. So this is just all representations of forms. But if you know two parts of the particular relationship in question, then you can specify that, I want all forms with the representation This is the indefinite plural nominative of average annual temperature, and it'll list the forms for you. And this was actually a pretty fast query. I imagine there's some overhead because of I'm doing this on a browser as opposed to this being done on the back end. But imagine if this interface were available in Lua, that would be fantastic. And we could do what Albin was suggesting, where having just feeding the form and then the representation, then getting all the forms and Lexemes out.
Yeah, and it would be great if the link data fragment service got more love as well. It's just fast for certain types of basic queries like the one you showed.
Yes. Yeah.
I'm not sure if that's actually been brought up with the current query service discussions searching for a replacement service. Because I wasn't actually aware that people use it that much.
No, I believe it's really great.
Okay.
When I harvest large amounts of data, especially.
Yeah. I have other uses for this beyond just looking for forms. There's some maintenance tasks that are actually aided a lot by something like this. So, yeah, it's definitely useful, and I think, assuming that for use cases which are this simple, I think it is absolutely a game changer for a lot of applications. Anyway, this is the Lexeme. I could put more things on this, but what else do we have? There weren't really any requests in the chat for more things, so.
No, I think you really show the potential here. I am excited. I think Albin is excited as well. And it also motivates me to make more high quality Lexemes, because sometimes you're thinking to yourself, why am I adding this stuff? Like, will it ever be used? And now you see, oh, there are several ways it could be used. So yes.
Yeah, and on my end, it's like motivates me to work on Wiktionary in a way, because previously I've never got into it because it's all the various templates they have. But if they know implement this, I can actually improve Wiktionary by editing Wikidata.
Precisely.
And that for me, that's an interface I know. I don't need to think about templates and things like that. And that excites me, as well as the license, as it's different.
Yes, the license is very important.
Yes.
Not for the other way around, though.
Right, and I'm putting up the link to the announcement once again, in case you have been watching this and want to play with this feature. There it is. There are links to the documentation on that link. So yes.
And if someone wants to modify the template that I just created right now, or the page that I created right now, if you could put those links up, maybe some people might be interested in adding the etymologies or the audio or.
If you put it in the private chat, I'll
sure. Sure thing. So here's the chat. So this is the actual page where the output was being displayed. This is the noun declension template, which I modified for the inputs. And then where is the actual module? So the module itself that I've created is this. I named it test because maybe module Wikidata should be something more significant. I wasn't about to declare that this is definitely what module Wikidata should refer to. Basically, that combination of things is what. Actually, let me reformat some of these links because I think the percent encoding messed up the URL.
I think they work. For this one, I changed to user. It should work as well.
Okay. Okay, good.
Yeah, that works.
And I guess from the sandbox, you'll find other ones.
All right. I guess that works.
Yeah.
Great.
Oh, and we have a last question here, I guess. From
Yes.
Leah, in your opinion, what would be the best way for people to share the templates that they are working on, learn from each other, even exchange code? Global template.
Yeah. Yes. Yes. Precisely. Yes. Long live Amir. Yes. Global templates are important. In the interim, though, I think Wikidata might be the best place for such a thing. There's definitely going to be some pages that exist for those who use Wiktionary, and there's got to be a landing page for Wiktionarians somewhere. So something like
Yeah, there is.
wikidata:/Wiktionary. Yeah, somewhere there, I guess you could probably post links to individual templates, individual pieces of code. That might be a good centralized place for that. It's all coming from Wikidata anyways, right? So might as well include that.
All right. Very nice. I'm excited. And I guess with that, we call it the show for today. And until next week, happy editing.
Happy editing.
Happy editing.
You.